Hi friends, Analeah here. Today I'm going to show you how to assemble this locker card with pop-up notebook paper. This card is great for first day of school, back to school, and even a teacher appreciation gift. Because this design has a print and cut with a score line, it's a little bit more tricky for Cricut users to set up. So first, I will go over the software and cutting setup. Okay, Cricut users, this one is a bit of a complicated setup because we have so many pieces and we have a more complex print and cut because we're not just cutting the outside border of this notebook paper. We have the 3 hole punches and a score line that we're cutting into it so that it lines up and scores nicely in the pop-up card. So follow along closely with these steps to set it up because it is complex and a little bit weird. Feel free, of course, to pause the video as you go through the steps to make sure that you can follow along and get through everything. So I'm going to start by uploading my special Cricut user SVG file. So in the zip file that you got, there's a specific folder that says Cricut users, and that's the SVG file that you want to use. Otherwise, this isn't going to work in the software. So I'm going to click upload image, and I'm just going to drag my SVG file from my Cricut users folder in, and our preview should look like this. We've got the front of the card, the base of the card, our notebook paper. We can see our little hole punches and our score line that's kind of at a diagonal, and then we've got 3 support pieces for the pop-up. Then I'm going to go ahead and click continue and then upload. And I'm going to close this sidebar. So right now our notebook paper is black, and that's scary, but I promise we're going to fix it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, everything is selected and grouped right now, and I want to ungroup that. So I'm going to click ungroup on our side panel, or that's Control-Shift-G. On a Mac, I think that's going to be Option-Shift-G. Somebody check me on that and let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. So we're going to ungroup that, and that gives us all of our sections. So we've got a few things that we need to attach. First, we have at the very bottom our card base and the score line for that card base. So we've got our big maroon colored rectangle for the card base, and then the score line for the center of the card. So I'm going to select this group and click attach. So we've got that taken care of. The next piece that is here working our way up from the bottom is a white panel, which is optional for the back of the card. So if you want to write a little bit more of a message to your recipient beyond what goes on the notebook paper, you have the option to cut this additional card that I put in there for you to glue on to the back. If you don't want to use that, you can go ahead and delete it. The next group up is our notebook paper. And so this is our little complex piece. There's 2 groups inside of this group, and this top group is our cut lines. So we've got a dashed line for our score, our 3 hole punch for the side of the paper, and then this big black box is the outside of the paper. So that we can see what we're doing temporarily, I'm going to select this black box and I'm going to change the operation from basic cut to guide, and then we can see that our notebook paper is happening underneath. So the notebook paper is what is in this group underneath, and if we twirl that open, we've got a whole bunch of lines and a white square. What we want to do is take this group and flatten it. So now you can see we've got nice blue and red lines, our white paper circle, our white paper square, and then we can see that we've got our hole punch black circles and our dashed score line black circle. And now we need to take this outside border that we made a guide and put that back to basic cut, and that's going to turn it black again. So underneath that, we have our nice flattened print and cut. Next, we need to attach these. So I'm going to click on that top level group. We have our cut and score lines. We have our flattened image. And then I'm going to come down here and click attach. So now those are stuck together. The next 3 pieces are these 3 support pieces for the pop-up mechanism inside of the card. They're all the same size, and so those are our 3 layers working our way up from here. So each one of those we're just going to select individually and click attach, and then again select and attach, and the last one select and attach. We have our red layer for the front of the card, which is just going to be solid with the lines cut out for the locker vents that go to the maroon color on the base of the card. And then this top layer is our construction of the locker mechanism itself. We don't need to do anything with this, so we're all set to go ahead and click make. So you should have 7 mats. We have our print then cut, we have white, we have 2 shades of gray, we have black, we have our maroon color, and then we have red for the front. Now you may be looking at this print then cut and feel slightly alarmed. What's happening is, again, when Cricut is showing you where it's going to cut, it fills shapes in black. So if it doesn't have a fill, it's just going to fill it black. And in this case, it's filling a black cut shape on top of our print and cut. But if we go ahead and click continue and start our print preview, you will see that it's going to print the notebook paper correctly as it should be. It's not going to print a big black box. So we've got all of our mats set up, and I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Now it's been a while since I've calibrated my print and cut, but I have already cut and tested this card, so I'm going to go ahead and say not now. If it's been a while since you've calibrated your print and cut, then you may want to go ahead and do that before you cut this card. Next, I am going to click send to printer. And now you can see the print preview of what it's actually going to print, which is our nice, beautiful notebook paper with the sensor marks added. And then I'm going to click next. And then we have our print set up. So my printer is selected. I'm going to print 1 copy. For this, you could absolutely toggle on add bleed, and that will give you a little bit of an extension on the blue and red lines so that when Cricut cuts this, we don't end up with any white on the edges. And then you can go ahead and click print. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and verify that our notebook paper printed properly, and I'm going to click done. And then that's going to take us to the next step where we select our paper and go ahead and get cutting. So I cut this on 65-pound cardstock, so I'll select that. And then I'll go ahead and finish cutting this and all of the rest of the pieces on my machine, and then I'll see you in the assembly. Okay, Silhouette users, let's get into the setup. So I have Silhouette Studio open. I've got just a blank mat here ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and drag in my SVG file. And now I'm going to start pulling things apart, and then we'll set up our document. So what I want to do first is go to my layers icon and open up that layers panel. So if you're using starter mode, I'll toggle that on. You'll have slightly bigger icons with labels, so don't be alarmed if your Silhouette Studio software looks a little bit different than mine. So we have a few sets of score lines that we need to make sure that we group onto things before we get into our cutting. So the base of the card is labeled here at the bottom. And if we select both of those, we'll see it's kind of showing us in here. We've got a score line and then we've got the shape for the bottom. So that we want to make sure that we get those and that we group them together. So in order to get those selected, we need to move some things out of our way. So we've got the front of our locker. I'm going to go ahead and move that off to the left. We also have this group of pieces for all of the lock assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and move all of those pieces out of the way and line them up over here by color so that we're ready to cut. Now we can actually see that set of score lines there. And so I've got that selected. So I'm just dragging to select. And if we look at our layers panel here, we can see that underneath the base, we've got the two components in there selected. So I'm going to right click and say group. You can use Control G or Option G if you're on a Mac to group those together. So our base is now attached to itself, and we can just go ahead and move that off to the side so we don't have to worry about losing that score line. Underneath our notebook paper, we can see there's this rounded white shape. And this is the back panel, which is optional if you want to write an additional message beyond what you put on the notebook paper. So I'm going to go ahead and move that out of the way over here. And then we have 3 sets of supports. And so we want to select each support individually with its cut lines. And you can see, so I drag to select that support. And then it has 3 sets of cut lines, which are dashed score lines. In our layers panel, we can see that that support is selected. I'm going to say right click, group, and then move that off to the side over here with that maroon locker. Again, I'm going to select and drag and group those together. Move that off to the side and then do the same for the last one. Group off to the side. So lastly, we're left with our notebook paper. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of those. Drag to select. We've got our paper layer. Make sure we can see that selected here in our layers panel. And then I'm going to right click and go ahead and say group. And then that'll allow us to move this around without losing the location of any of our cut lines. So I'm done with the layers panel. So I'll go ahead and close that to free up some space. And now we want to set up our print and cut. So first thing I'm going to do is come up to this top part and set up my page setup for the paper that I have. So I'm going to cut this on a letter sized paper. So I'm going to change my media size drop down to 8.5 by 11. And then what we want to do is go ahead and turn on our print border. It's helpful to see when positioning. So if we go to our grid settings, we can turn on our print border. And we can also turn on our cut border while we're in here, but the print border is a little tighter than the cut border. So if we're inside the print border, we're inside the cut border. Next, we need to turn on our registration marks for the print and cut. And so that's this icon down here. It's like a square with little triangles in the corners. And so if I click on that, it will open up our print and cut panel. And then I can say enable registration marks. So now this is showing us the registration area. And I want to just move this a little bit so that it's outside of that hashed area and won't interfere with anything that's happening while it's trying to locate those registration marks for the sensor. At this point, if I wanted to print a message onto the notebook paper, I could add that now, or set up a sketch operation if I wanted to sketch a message onto this notebook paper before assembling the card. Of course, you can always write your message by hand. So this is all set to go ahead and print, and then it needs to be cut. So I've got this positioned here. We can choose print in the upper menu or just print from that print and cut panel on the side there. So if I click print, it's going to show us our print preview with what it's actually going to print, so we can see that it's not going to print any of the cut lines, and we're getting our registration mark pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and click print and then send that to my printer. So now that we have our notebook paper printed with our registration marks, we want to do our cut operation. So I'm going to go ahead and close the print and cut panel. And then I'm going to make sure that I have my mat and paper still set up correctly. So I'm going to cut this on a standard 12 by 12 cameo mat. And then I'm going to go ahead and come over here and click send. We still need our registration marks on, or else it's not going to know to use the registration marks. So put your paper onto your mat and load your media. I'm going to set this to plain cardstock. I used a pretty light 65-pound cardstock, so it's lighter, but not as light as printer paper. And then I am going to load this and go ahead and get it cut. Okay, now that we have our notebook paper cut, I'm going to go ahead and select this, and we're just going to drag this off to the side. I'm going to come over to the right hand side and open my print and cut panel again and turn off the registration marks. And then I'm going to cut the rest of this off 12 by 12 cardstock. So I'm also going to come up to my page setup panel, to that top one, and then I'm going to change my media size to 12 by 12. In the grid settings, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my print border. I don't need that anymore, but I'll leave the cut border on so I can see as I line things up. Now, what I like to do is group everything by color on the left side, and then as I cut things, I will move them off the mat onto the right side. So I'm going to drag over my card base and my 3 support pieces that need to be cut, and go ahead and send these. And then once these are done, I will just drag them off to the side and work my way through the rest of the pieces. Okay, now I have all of my pieces cut here. I've got a blank piece of notebook paper, which I'm going to assemble the card with. But here's one that I did where I printed a message while I did the print portion of the print and cut, so that I could put a message in the card. So you can, of course, like we talked about in the setup, print a message, use the sketch feature on your machine to do a message. Or at this stage, you could handwrite a message onto the blank notebook paper before you get into the assembly. In addition to the pieces that I have cut, I have a bone folder to help get good score lines for the pop-up mechanism. I've got my Barely Art craft glue, which will help make sure that I have a little bit of wiggle room to line everything up. I've got some tweezers to help out with the small bits. I've got a glue eraser, and I have some 1/8 inch foam Barely Art cubbies to pop up some of the pieces for the locker lock mechanism. I also have a stack of just white cardstock that I'm going to use to hold the pop-up card down while we let the glue dry. So we're going to start by doing the mechanism. So we have our base card here with a score line, and we're just going to fold that in half and give it a really good crease. Make sure that's nice and flat. And then we're gonna crease it the other way. So a way to make sure that you have really good smooth pop-up action on a card is to make sure that your creases are well worked. So here is the card base. Now the next thing we're gonna do is construct these 3 support tabs into the center of this, which will eventually hold our notebook paper. So I'm gonna put this right here for just a second. These tabs have 3 sets of score lines in them. So we're gonna fold and score really well with our bone folder all of these score lines in both directions. Okay, now let's bring our card back. We've got our card open and we're going to take one of these tabs. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which one. And we're going to fold the ends in. So we're going to get a little triangle. And what we want to do is glue this about the middle of the page. And what we want our little feet to be right on either side of the score line for the center of the card. We don't want to touch the center score line. If we do that, it's going to interfere with how the card opens and closes. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the end here. We want enough that it's going to glue down, but we don't want to like squeezy out and make a big mess. Because we'll end up accidentally gluing the card closed. So about midway on the card, and again right up against that score line. Now I'll push that down. And then I'm going to fold it in half. So I've got that other little glue tab here. And what we're going to do is put glue here and then close the card. And that's going to glue this tab directly where it needs to be opposite this tab so that it lines up perfectly. So I'm kind of spreading the glue a little bit so that it doesn't squeeze out and make a mess. Of course, it dries clear, but I don't want any extra glue gluing things down that aren't supposed to be when we're doing this mechanism. So I've got that tab folded in half. It's glued up on the top. And I'm just going to fold this card over and give that a good press. And then when we open that, we have a nice little triangle in the center of our card. So now we're going to make little tables on both sides. So we have a similar process. We're going to add glue to our tab and we're going to glue this right up at the top of this triangle that we just made. Again, we want to make sure it's like lined up right at the top and that we're not crossing over that score at all. I'm going to add my glue. And then line that up right there. And you might find it's like a little bit delicate and hard to grab, so you might find that once you get it in position, you can kind of squeeze it with the tweezers. And we can also fold the card and push that and make sure that we've got that nice and glued down. Now, what we want is for this other little footy to come underneath, and it's going to like make a little rhombus here. So what we're gonna do is add glue to our little footy. And then we are going to close the card with that glue face up. Okay, give that a good press. And then when we open the card, we've got our little rhombus shape. So I'm gonna just push that again. Make sure it's really stuck. And then we're gonna repeat that same step to give this little table mechanism on the other side. So again, we're going to add some glue to one end and glue that right at the top of our little triangle here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and fold that closed and give it a good press. And then we're going to add glue to the opposite side. So again, like if we fold this in half, we want to add glue to the top so that when it folds under, it's glued down. And then again, so we're folding this in half and pushing it down so the glue is towards the front of the card here. And we're gonna push that down. Give it a good press. And we open that up, we've got our nice little rhombus. I've got a little glue leakage right here, so I just want to clean that up real quick. And there's our little table piece, which will hold our notebook paper. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and set it aside with that stack of heavy cardstock sitting on it. And we're just going to let that dry while we work on the front of the card. All right, so we have our locker front, and then we have a couple pieces here for the lock mechanism. So we've got our light gray piece, a little darker gray piece, a white circle, a little kind of black cog shape to do our numbers, and then another dark gray dot to be the like middle part that you hold on to. So we're gonna glue these and stack them up and put them on the front of the card. So first thing I'm gonna do is add some glue to this like dark gray cup shape. And then position it. There's a little bit of a border around the top and sides. Okay, so now we're gonna glue this black piece on top of our white piece to get the little number hash marks for the combination. Let me just line up that little circle. We're going to take the two large gray pieces for the lock and add our glue. And then just position that kind of down on the side of our locker here. And now I'm going to go ahead and use our little pop cubby. And put that on the back here. And sort of position our lock. And then I'm going to use another one. On our little circle for the knob. And just stick that right in the center. So now our lock has some dimension to it. I will set that aside while we let the inside of the card dry before we do our final assembly. Okay, now comes the fun part. Let's put our notebook paper on our pop-up mechanism. So I've got a blank piece here. Again, you want to put your message on here before you assemble the card. So write it, print it, use the sketch feature on your machine. And then what we're gonna do is take this and fold it on the sort of like angled score line. I'm gonna do this carefully because of course we don't want to mess up the message that we've written. And we do want to just very carefully fold this back the other way. So gentle, make sure you're not setting it into glue, but we just want to make sure that this moves freely. The next one we're going to do is take this score line and we're going to line that up so that's like right in the center along the score in between our table. And we're kind of going to line this up and make sure that we get this about middle of the paper so that our paper is nicely positioned in the card, but we're not sticking out. And what we're going to do is go ahead and add some glue. And I'm just going to have this folded and have this slightly folded so I can really put that score in there. And then line this up about midway. And I'm going to give that a fold and a press. And then what we're going to do is add our glue to the other side. We're going to give that a fold right back down on top. And I can press. And very gently, since the glue is still wet, we can open the card up. And you can see that our paper opens and closes. So I'm going to go ahead and close that for a second. And now we can do the front and the back of the card. So we have the locker front that gets glued onto the front. And then we have our optional back panel. So you could add this to the back of the card if you wanted to write a bit longer of a message or something different than what you put on the notebook paper inside the card. You could also, of course, use like a white gel pen, or depending on the color of your locker, you know, write another little message on the side. But that back panel is there for you to put on optionally if you want to add a little bit more of a message. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. What we're going to do is add our glue to the back of this locker piece. And then we're going to line this up on the front of our card. And then give that all a good press. And there we have the front of our locker with our little lock. And we open that up gently, it's still wet, and reveal our notebook paper message. And so go ahead and set that aside, let it dry. And there you have your fun locker notebook paper pop-up card. Thanks for crafting with me today. I'll see you next time.